Hello and welcome to another episode on Srilingo. When we talk of patriarchal biases, we always say that, women have been wronged and they have been wronged. But ever think about the fact that maybe there are patriarchal biases that work against men as well? Last week, we did an episode on postpartum depression. The word itself is associated with women. Nobody would ever think that postpartum depression is a condition that can affect men as well. Today, I have Tanmoy Goswami with me. He likes to refer to himself as an ex journalist. He's been with Economic Times, he's been with the Fortune magazine, and now Tanmoy runs his own platform Sanity by Tonmoy, which is India's first independent mental health storytelling platform. I wanted to introduce Tonmoy on the Srilingo podcast because let's be honest, Srilingo is all about walking hand in hand with the other gender. Tonmoy is here today to lend some very, very insightful observations on mental health for men and especially on postpartum depression for men. Tanmoy, welcome to Srilingo. Thank you for giving me your time. I'm very, very grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Smita, for having me, and thanks for the introduction.
Tanmoy, I just wanted to understand postpartum depression in men. Sounds like an alien concept for most of us. Trust me, before I came across your LinkedIn post, I had no idea what this entailed. You want to give us a little, you want to start with what this is, and then we'll move into other aspects of mental health for men?
It was exactly the same for me when I first heard about postpartum depression for men. I was a bit agog because it just didn't seem like something that was in consonance with what you generally hear about when you talk about postpartum. The term itself sort of invokes the idea of a new mother struggling with hormonal changes, this massive new life change. And there are also a lot of other socioeconomic factors that play into postpartum depression for women. Now, when it comes to men, I think this phenomenon is severely under-researched. But now there is a lot of science that is suggesting that non-birthing parents also undergo hormonal changes that can disrupt their mental health. When it comes to men in particular, here's some data that I was able to dig out. So, with the caveat that a lot of this is taken from Western contexts, because in India, mental health in general, men's mental health, and that too postpartum depression among men, data on that is notoriously difficult to find. But
Hmm.
here's some data that I was able to find from research papers. So around 10% of fathers are said to be depressed in the first year after birth, which is twice as high as in the general male population. Many fathers will also develop generalized anxiety, they will develop OCD, they will develop PTSD
Hmm.
during this period. Then there's one study which said that the pooled prevalence of postnatal depression among fathers in India was 19.4%, almost 20%. So one in five fathers, which is higher than the global rate. The prevalence of PPD in women in India is 22%. But of course, this is not about playing off women's struggles against men's struggles. This is just something that should help us, start thinking about the magnitude of this problem that we don't talk about.
Tonmoy, at Srilingo, we cover various topics, right? So over the past 2 months, the kind of topics mostly, and this was not a conscious decision, but it happened that we're dealing with a lot of health-related conversations. So there was menopause, and then there was infertility, and many other things. Now, be it menopause, where men have their own version of what you call menopause. I think it's called andropause. Or infertility, which is again both related to, it's a gender agnostic issue, right? In both these cases, what I understood is that yes, we have started talking about these things, but these things are very, very women centric. We don't realize that, for example, when I was having the conversation with Fatima regarding infertility, she said at least women have another woman to confide to. Think about a man, he feels society has made a man in his head. He's supposed to be the strong superman who can have no flaws, who can never cry, who can never fall down. So, where does that man go? The moment you say that a man is going through some sort of a mental health condition, immediately everybody around will start thinking of him as a lesser man, not man enough, not manly enough. I think that
Mm.
is one big issue that when it comes to men's health, we need to understand, overcome. As somebody who's been in, the professional field and now doing your own work with regards to mental health, why did you start this, Tanmay? I want to understand. Because not many people speak about men's mental health. You do. I want to understand, why did you start this? Where is that gap you found in society?
You know, just to sort of briefly address the point that you made about issues like infertility and why men are generally not associated with these problems, or when they experience a challenge like that, they're not able to speak up.
Hmm.
This is again a classic patriarchal trap, right? Because for centuries, women have been blamed for if they're not if a couple remains childless, then it's the woman that is blamed for it. So I think the fact that women have peer groups where they talk about it, sure, that's all very good. But the fact is that even today, it's the woman of the family that shoulders sort of this sort of stigma, blame when a couple remains childless.
Right.
Um, and you can see then how that impacts the man, because even if it is legitimately a problem that the man is facing, now there is complete sort of erasure of the fact that a man can also be going through the same, experiencing the same problem, or maybe it is the man that is who is undergoing infertility. And the taboo, the stigma, and all of that, it's a classic sort of patriarchal entrapment that binds both the genders together, as it were. Now, why did I start talking about men's mental health? Well, um, I always introduce myself as a cishet, upper caste, upper class, English speaking man from the majority community. I think the only thing that I'm not is white. If I were a white person, I would have ticked every box of privilege.
Mhm.
So um, I think the reason that a lot of men of my generation don't are not able to speak up is because there is a lot of guilt that we carry, which is a byproduct again of this beautiful, thing that we call patriarchy. I started writing about mental health primarily driven by my own lived experience. I have lived with a cocktail of mental illnesses, virtually my entire adult life. And when I started sort of small time advocacy around it in 2015, 2016, around that time, I had to take a forced break from work. I was severely depressed. I was suicidal. I was self-harming, and I had to kind of withdraw into a dark room for a year. And I was looking around for material that could speak to me as a man, um, as a career person who had, very aggressive ambitions. I was in journalism, which is an industry that is absolutely dripping, sort of like this idea of machismo, and you have to be ruthless, you have to be aggressive, you have to be very, very masculine to survive in that industry. And I felt like I did not fit in at all within that stereotype. So I was looking for uh, you know uh, anything that would speak to me, speak to my experience, and I couldn't find anything. So one night I kind of decided to rant about it. And I wrote a post on LinkedIn. And then I don't know why I wrote a post on LinkedIn of all places. Later, my friends told me that it was the stupidest thing I could have done, because if you confess, this is again, like I said, this is about 7, 8 years ago. So you don't go to LinkedIn and talk about your mental health challenges, especially if you're a journalist, because then you are making yourself untouchable professionally. Nobody is ever going to give you a job again. But I don't know why, it was just a moment of I think it was just a wild thing to have done. I wrote that post, I went to sleep, and then when I woke up the next morning, I saw that my inbox was flooded with DMs from people from around the world, because apparently LinkedIn had picked up my post and displayed it on their homepage. And as a result of that, that post kind of went viral, and I started getting messages from people in the US, people in the UK, people in, of course, a lot of people from India. And I was absolutely stunned by this sort of outpouring of solidarity. And a lot of people said, that they felt very seen by my post. And these are people who did not share anything. We had nothing in common. We came from very different worlds. And so I was really, really struck by the magnitude of loneliness in this world, that um, somebody were to read a complete stranger's random LinkedIn post and feel so seen and heard. And I realized that, this is real. And um, I had a bit of a platform, I had a bit of a voice, thanks to my profession. And writing about it helped me heal. It was very cathartic for me. I think most of us who end up working in mental health, we don't do it to change the world or to help anybody else. I think we primarily do it to help ourselves. So that's how it started. I started maintaining a journal, almost a daily journal of my life through depression, anxiety, and later OCD, self-harm, and all of this on Twitter. That thread also went viral. A lot of, it became my window into the world of mental health advocacy. A lot of friends, mentors from the community contacted me. And then I started speaking on panels, etc. And it's only been in the last year and a half where I have really started grappling more with men's mental health issues in particular. Um, it's a very thorny area, um, because there is always the fear of coming across as somebody who's competing with women. And I always like to say that we are not participating in the pain Olympics. Uh, no one gets a medal for any of this. And, while I preface all my conversations by acknowledging the absolutely horrifying burden of mental health challenges on women, and on indeed on trans people, on sort of non-heteronormative populations. um, it is important that we start talking about men's very peculiar, very particular challenges, because without that, I don't feel that we as society can really move forward. So many men are so hesitant to even walk up to a therapist or walk up to a psychiatrist. A lot of men will never get diagnosed, right? And so unless we start talking about these issues, at least in our elite privileged bubbles, how do we move forward as a society?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so that's, I think, what kind of motivated me.
Like you said, this is not some pain Olympics, one gender against the other. I think the entire conversation focusing on mental wellness for men should, now it's that time has come where we have to normalize this, because mental health, give or take, Tonmoy, I don't know if you'd agree with me, again is very very focused towards women's well-being, because men are not speaking up. Men think nothing is wrong with them because society has told them that you are the provider, everybody's responsibility rests on your shoulder, nothing can happen to you. If that poor man is dying 1,000 deaths every day, he will not open his mouth. And unless we say that it's okay for a man to seek, professional help for his mental well-being, it is, we need to normalize this. We are not normalizing this. We on one hand, a man is somebody who's too much under pressure. You have to fulfill everybody's responsibilities. You have to take care of your parents. You have to take care of your kids. You have to take care of your siblings. Where does that poor man time, the energy, or the confidence to seek professional help? And who is telling him that it's a normal thing to do?
I think, I mean, it's a really, really complex issue, right?
Absolutely,
When you
absolutely.
talk about normalization, I think um, normalization will not happen in a vacuum, right? It's not something that, one morning we just wake up and flip the switch and the conversation gets normalized. I think
Mhm.
um, there are so many different factors, like, all of those things that you talked about, the fact that there are these stereotypes of the strong provider figure, right? The fact that Boys Don't Cry. Um, the complete lack of peer groups where men can go and share these problems. And actually, mental health is a very terribly misunderstood concept. Uh, we don't necessarily always need help from professionals. Actually, a relatively smaller percentage of people with mental health challenges will need professional help. Um, Companionship, peer groups, these are extremely powerful outlets where people can go and sort of unburden and feel heard, seen, held. And the sheer lack of that, the absence of that for men can be very cruel, can be very devastating. So
Absolutely.
all of this contributes to the silence. If you look at pop culture, right? I mean, I recently posted about this absolutely insufferable insurance ad that I think everybody has seen in India, where this man has died and his portrait is up on the wall, and his wife is railing at this poor dead man's portrait, saying, "Oh, you died without buying an insurance." Term insurance policy, and now how am I supposed to pay the rent, and how am I supposed to pay for my kids' education?
Mm.
And I was thinking, so many men must be watching this ad right now, and maybe some of them were on the cusp of reaching out for help, and then they see this ad and it reinforces all of those stereotypes all over again, and they will never open their mouths after seeing this. So there are so many different insidious ways in which a man's um, sort of need to open up gets thwarted daily. There is also when it comes to men not seeking help, there is another relatively less talked about aspect to it, which is the absence of male therapists in this country, right? The entire profession, the entire field of psychology therapy has been feminized. So there are very, very few male therapists. Men grow up not having good male role models. And then when they grow older, they're facing all of these problems. They want to go and talk to somebody. A lot of them would want to go and talk to another man, but there are no male professionals out there. So that again complicates the problem. And a lot of men that I speak to have told me that they feel that they fear being judged by a woman therapist,
Mm.
even though that fear might be completely unfounded. But
Mm.
they feel that if they were to go into the therapy room and speak to a woman about their inner lives and their sort of like deepest, darkest secrets, they feel that they might end up being judged, and so they don't seek help at all. So it's a cesspit of different sort of toxic factors.
I think I'm all for women empowerment. I'm all, for women breaking, these old shackles that prevented them from achieving great things in life. But I don't want to be in this mindset while I leave men behind. I have grown up in a happy family with male members. There was a grandfather, there was a father, there were uncles, there were so many people. I mean, men or women, Tonmoy, I think this entire conversation of having mental well-being, being able to speak up, being able to, have a community that understands you without judging you, all of these things, women are slowly taking baby steps. We talk about self-love, we talk about self-care, all of these things. The moment I say self-love, self-care, it just associates with women. Why not men? Why don't men need self-love? Don't men need me time? Don't men need all of these things? I don't know when it became a battle of the genders that all of the things that women are fighting to achieve should not be given to men, or we've just left the men behind. The moment, think about it, the moment I said self-love, did you think of a man's image in your head, or woman's? Most likely a woman's. That's what it has come to. That is why men are getting left behind. That is why men are not able to speak up. There are no peer groups for men where they can just go and, be a little less manly for once and sit and say, hey, you know what, this is my problem.
The reason why self-care and self-love have again become almost exclusively associated with women is because of this narrative, and a very, very legitimate narrative, that women need self-care and self-love to get away from the problems caused by men. So it's really not, it's not surprising at all that these concepts have become almost exclusively feminine ideas.
Why
And then,
men don't need self-love and self-care to get away
of
from the
course they do.
problems caused by women?
Of course, that well, I don't know about problems caused by women. I think, like I said, patriarchy cuts both ways, and definitely, I'm a bit, I have a slightly uneasy relationship with the idea of self-care because I feel like self-care is just a classic, again, capitalist trap because, it's a way of individualizing massive social problems. It's a way of saying, here, go and get some retail therapy and, forget about the burnout that your job is causing, or forget about, all the other social economic nonsense that drives people up the wall in the first place. So I have an uneasy relationship with self-care. And again, those patterns play up a lot more problematically in the lives of women, who are basically taught to anesthetize themselves against, these social forces by going for a massage, or whatever, having a day out with their friends. These are not real solutions. I do feel that these little rituals, anything that gives you joy, is very can be very powerful. So I don't mean to trivialize any of this. I feel like, Audre Lorde had said that self-care is an act of revolution. And so I feel like, creating these pockets of joy, creating these moments of joy, not everything has to have, a very solemn, somber sort of packaging. If going out there and coloring your hair gives you joy, by all means do it. But what I'm trying to say is that these are not sustainable solutions to deep
Absolutely.
social problems, right? And when it comes to men, again, I mean, I think it's a question of time more than anything else, right? Which man who's supposed to, and now again, this generation of men who are supposed to be providers as well as be touchy-feely parents, play the role of the sort of play an emotionally nurturing role, in addition to, having a livelihood, bringing in the money. That doesn't leave men with any time at all to tend to their own sort of self-care needs. Um, Once again, the burden of unpaid care work has historically fallen on women. So um, it's a it's an extremely fraught conversation for men to even enter. I believe that, a lot of young boys, they feel so lost and confused today, and they're so vulnerable to, the sort of toxic messaging by, pop psychology gurus who are filling them with vitriol, who are telling them, you are being victimized, these feminists are out there to get you. And you can see why these young boys, young men are so vulnerable, so such easy targets for that messaging, because suddenly they're fighting for relevance. Suddenly they're fighting for, space in a world that seems to be completely loaded against them. And nobody is telling them that these thought patterns are wrong, that there is a flaw in that kind of thinking. Nobody is, putting an arm around their shoulders and saying, it's all right, let's walk through this together. So, so there are all of these, we're living through a moment in history where men are renegotiating their own identities. What is their role in the family? What is their role in the community? And I think we need to talk about the economic upheavals that are playing out in real time right now. We don't, let's talk about like the disruption that is being caused by AI, right? So many jobs are disappearing. So a lot of men, I have had to renegotiate my own professional identity. I was in a very well-paying job. I had a settled career trajectory, and suddenly I lost my job, and then, I had to reinvent myself as a professional. I was very fortunate that I managed to do that to an extent. But a lot of men are dropping out of their careers, they're losing their jobs. And if you are at a senior position in your company, it becomes even harder for you to find another job. So now you have to figure out your career in the face of this tech onslaught. You also have to be this emotionally nurturing figure. Um, that doesn't leave men with any time, any energy, any bandwidth to dabble into things like self-care. It seems like an absurd fantasy for most men, as it has been for women for millennia. So yeah, I really don't know if there is a pill that will magically cure this.
I just I just feel that I've had such a nice conversation with you, Tanmoy, because this was not one gender against the other. This was not about one-upmanship. This was about, let's be honest, both genders have their share of problems. Both need to be acknowledged. And the one thing that applies to women can apply to men as well, because at the end of the day, both are human beings, both are vulnerable, and both are susceptible to whatever is going on around them. This was such an unbiased viewpoint, like you introduced yourself and said that, I have ticked all the boxes when it comes to privilege. White is the only thing remaining. I mean, that's just your honesty. That's just your honesty, and the kind of honesty that you're bringing towards your work, I think, will help people understand what you're doing, and will also enable them to, I think, reach out to you, Tanmoy, because I think that's the whole purpose of Sanity by Tanmoy, right? To get more people to open up about what they are going through. Thank you so much for giving me your time today. I had such a wonderful time. Um, I hope that more and more men start voicing their feelings, start talking about what they want from life, how they envision a path for themselves going forward. Because let's be honest, men are not just supposed to be born, bear everybody's responsibilities, and die quietly. They also deserve equal amount of love, equal amount of care, and equal amount of understanding. As much as we are working towards giving it towards women folk, we must work towards giving it for men as well. Thank you so much for giving me your time today, Tanva.
Thank you very much, Smita. Thank you.
Thank you.